go. Make sure everybody smiles. So today really will be a turning point, as I said, in terms of the direction that leadership will start. And as we'll see at the end of this chapter, what the elders and the populace is asking for. So if you remember, what happened was towards the end of last chapter ends off with Shmuel almost giving kind of his biography, that he was that he judged Israel and that he built an altar. But as we know in the Torah, there in ein mugdam umeachar b'Torah. The Torah is not written chronologically, so it's written thematically, or at least in spurts of themes that make sense. And now in chapter 8, we jump some 30 years, and we see that now Shmuel is old. Vahi kasher zaken Shmuel. When Shmuel was older, Vayasem et banav shoftim leIsrael. What he did was, it was harder for him to get around. He wasn't as mobile. And so what he did is he placed his children as judges on before the Israelites. And who were these children? Vahishem benoha bechor Yoel. The elder son was Joel. Veshem mishnehu Aviyah. And the second son's name was Aviyah. Shoftim biVe'er Shava. Where were they judges? In Be'er Shava, in the south of Israel. However, Velo halchu vanav bid rachav, but his sons did not follow in the ways of Shmuel. Vaitu acharei habatza. They swayed towards bribery. Vaikhu shochad, and they also take bribery. Batza is a form of gain, where they're using their clout to as a pressure to get money. Vaikhu shochad, they also took bribery. Vayatu mishpat, and they also subverted justice. They turned, in other words, if somebody happened to smear them a little bit, they may look the other way. So their judgment was tainted. Does this sound like something?
Like politics.
Yes, of course, but more in reference to our books, what we're reading. What does it sound like?
I seem to remember Banim Gidalti Ramamti Vehem Pashubi. Where does that come from?
Okay, Vehem Pashubi. Okay, that's God speaking that I've raised the Israelites and they turn away from me. But more, if you remember at the beginning of Shmuel, what happens when Shmuel is birthed and he's of a certain age? Where did Shmuel have to go? Who actually brought up Shmuel? Do you remember that? Who brought up Shmuel?
Eli.
Eli HaKohen, exactly. Do you remember that? He was brought up with Eli HaKohen. And Eli had how many sons?
2 bad sons.
Remember that? Pinchas and Chofni, who were corrupt, who also smear and drayed behind the scenes. And now we have a very similar, very sad comparison, that now Shmuel hopes that his sons might not, are worthy of continuing in his leadership role. However, they do not. Okay? So what happens? Vaitkaptu kol ziknei Yisrael. And so the elders of Israel all assembled. Vayavo el Shmuel haramata. And they came to Samuel in Ramah. This was where Samuel lived. Vayimru elav, and they spoke to him. Hinata zakanta, you are now getting old. Uvanecha lo halchu bidrachecha, and your children, your sons, are not following in your path. Ata, now, simma lanu melech leshoftenu kechol hagoim. We request that you put for us, establish a kingship, establish a king, a monarch, place for us a king, and that the king should be the judge over us just as all the other nations have. So what seems like a legitimate request, they're looking at it, look at it from the elders' perspective, right? You have Shmuel, who's the leader. He puts his two sons to help him out with Shoftim to lead. They are corrupt, and now before Samuel, it's too late, and Samuel dies, and his children are still in power, so to speak, or have at least leadership roles. The elders have a good legitimate request. They say, you know what, your children are not exactly quite like you. Why don't we look at a different way of leadership? What? Establish for us a king. Vayera hadavar b'nei Shmuel. However, this option, this idea, displeased, was very wicked, or was not pleasant in the eyes of Shmuel. Kasher amru tenalanu melech leshofteinu, just as they requested to appoint a king to govern. Vaitpalel Shmuel el Adonai, and so Shmuel turns to God for advice, and he prays to God. Vayomer Adonai el Shmuel. God spoke to Shmuel. Shma bekol ha'am. Go and listen to that which the nation is asking. Lechol asher myu alecha ki lo otcha ma'asu. Listen to all that which they tell you, for they have not strayed or rejected you. Ki oti ma'asu mimloch alehem. In other words, listen to them. You have nothing against them. They're not rebelling against you. They are actually rebelling against me. That's God's quarrel with the people. Kechol hamasim asher asu miyom ha'alotu tama mitzrayim ve'ad hom yom hazeh. This is exactly the same. They're repeating the same pattern. Just since I've taken them out of Egypt, I've taken them out of Egypt until today. Vayazvuni, vayavdu Elohim acharim. They leave me and they go and they worship other gods. Ken hema osim gamlach. Now finally you understand. This is what they are doing before you. In other words, all this is unfolding before your eyes. You are seeing it very clearly that they're rejecting me. They want a king of flesh and blood. But vata shma bekolam. But nonetheless, heed their demand. Ach ki ha'ed ta'id bahem vehigaret alehem. However, before I fall into there and allow them to have the king, I want you but to give them the following warnings. Vehigat alehem mishpat hamelech asher imloch alehem. You go tell them what they should expect once they have a king. So in other words, God tells Samuel, hey, listen, it's not the first rodeo. I've been there before. This happens all the time. They reject me. And it's almost kind of like God is already used to it. And he's allowing it to go. However, he tells them there's a warning to come, because with the king will come certain things. So go tell them, warn them, and see what they want. At least they will know what the possibility of for every action there's a reaction. See what they are getting themselves into. So Vayomer Shmuel et kol divrei Adonai el ha'am. And so Samuel spoke all the words of God to the nation. Hashwalim meito melech, all those who've asked him for a king. And then we see a samach here, which means that's the end of that paragraph, the end of that sentence. And now we're moving into the new idea. What's the idea? Here is the warnings that God is bringing to the people. Vayomer, and so Samuel was speaking. Ze yihiyeh mishpat hamelech asher imloch alechem. Just remember, this is going to be the customs or the normalcy. This is what you should expect from the king that will reign over you. Et penechem yikach. He will take your sons. Veshem vesam lo bemerkavto ufarashav. He will take your sons, the best of your children, and he will appoint them as his masters of chariots, ufars, and horsemen, veratzu lifnei mer kafto, and they will serve as outer runners for his chariots. In other words, people who predecess for his convoy. In other words, expect that your children will be taken. And what will use your children? Velasum lo sarei alafim vesarei chamishim. He will also use all your children, and he will appoint them as his chiefs of thousands and of 50s. Velacharosh charisho veliktor ketziro, as well as he will use them to have to plow his fields and to reap his harvest. Velasot kol milchamto uchle richbo, and also to make his weapons and the equipment for his chariots. In other words, he's going to use, expect that your children, as part of the service that he will be doing to the people, he will also use the best artisans for his needs. Ve'et benotechem yikach, and he will also take your daughters, lerakachot ul tabachot ul ofot, as perfumers. So if you do you remember, we're coming right now to the what holiday is just around the corner in 3 weeks?
Purim.
Purim. So if you remember Esther, what does Esther do? Right before she goes to see the king, she sits shisha chodashim b'shem and amon. She's sitting and she's bathing in all these special oils and ointments, so that when she becomes before the king, she will smell nice, and Christian Dior and and Dolce Gabbana, and she has to make all these nice and wonderful scents. And so here we also have, in those days, what do you have? You have people who are perfumers, whether it's in literally taking baths or in every room. Ever see like we have the fanners, we have like the those servants who are the manual air conditioning, right? Like in terms of keeping the king and the queen comfortable. You also have perfumers, so people who are in the room to make the room smell good. So whether they're walking around with roses, walking around with some kind of oil or scent, but in other words, for their own betterment, for their own appreciation, for the king's glory, so to speak. In other words, there will be new positions in the country, positions that haven't been there before, for the use of the king. And they will also use your daughters, again, not only perfumers, ul tabachot, as cooks, ul ofot, and as well as bakers. Ve'et sedotechem, ve'et karmechem, and all the choicest parts of your fields and of your vineyards. Ve'zetechem hatovim, ikach venatan l'avadav, and as well the best of your olive groves, he will give them to his servants. Not necessarily servants, but those that he appoints. He obviously won't give everything to his to servants. In other words, this Esther is what you kind of mentioned beforehand. This is politics, right? The best offices he will give to those that make sure that he stays in office as a smearing campaign. V'zar echem v'char mechem ya'asor. Just remember as well, he will put a tithing, a tax of 1/10 on your grain and on your wine, your vintages. V'natan lesarisa v'lavadav, and on this too, he will give to all those that support him. Okay. Ve'et avdeichem ve'et shivchotechem ve'et bachurechem hatovim ve'et chamorechem yikach ve'asam lilchto. He will also tithe or take as part of his payment package. He will take all your male and female slaves and your choice young men and from your working animals, and all put them to work for him. In other words, get ready. There will be somebody who will have his hand in your property. That is what he's warning. God is warning of the new king. Don't think it's just somebody sitting up there, but you're going to be paying physically for it. You want something physical? You want now a king? You want blood? he will also want physical things. He will take from you. Esther.
The king in this case is really a dictator.
Not really. This is he's saying the reality in terms of what in return for his services, the king will expect. This is how it's done in the other nations as you requested. You wanted a king that is the king just like every other nation. What's the other king? They get to live also posh life. They get the choicest of things in order with the pressures that go along with the office of king. They will demand all these things from you. In other words, I see it as follows. I see it as moving away from the spirituality of having God as the king, where if you think about it, what does it really cost you to have God as your king?
Well, God
cost?
is God is
No, what does it cost you?
is a give and take. God is saying if you live a good life, you'll be able to have a richer life. And when I say rich, I don't mean money necessarily, but a quality of life that's good because you'll be doing good things, and you'll be receiving for doing good things. But it's not a materialistic kind of a king.
Okay, so you answered, it's not materialistic. So in other words, really day by day, you follow God's ways. What is it costing you?
Nothing
Okay, so
except devotion.
it costs you somewhat, right? It costs you your time. It costs you, yes, you do have to spend the money on a talit, on a tefillin, on kosher food, on certain things. Yes, so you can say there is, let's say, cost, so to speak, associated with it, but not where your choice now it's going into your livelihood, your physical stuff that in those days, all those items that were mentioned were the like the decisive having your choicest servants, the best of your fields. Which fields? Not just stam, but these were grain and vintages, which were key. These are key produce. These are not bananas. In those days, it wasn't like a secondary third. These are the number, the most important, and zaitim and your oil, and from your olives. In other words, you're gonna feel it financially. You think it's gonna be all roses and it's gonna be great because now you're gonna have a physical king. Well, it's gonna also affect your physical things because that king is physical, and he also wants a lot of things. So you wait and see. It's going to cost you dearly. Tzomchem ya'asor v'atem tihiyu lo lavadim. He will tax your flocks tenthful or 1/10. And really, at the end of the day, just remember, you will turn into slaves. Uz katem bayomahu, and it will be that day later on in the future, you will start to cry out and yell, Milifnei malkechem asher bechartem lachem. You're going to start crying from all that which you are suffering under the king which you have chosen. Velo ya'aneh Adonai etchem bayom hu. Just remember, you rejected me. I will not answer your call, your cries that day. Because who's your God? I mean, who's your king? You've chosen you've chosen a king of flesh. Go cry to him. That's as a parent, sometimes when you want to make a point to your children, and you say, okay, you know what? Go have it. You want go ahead, but when the bills come in, don't come to me. Go get ahead. Go buy the car that you really want. Just remember, when the brakes go and you can't afford it, you'll have a very beautiful car sitting on the driveway that you can enjoy it as a beautiful paperweight, but don't come for the parents to start financing it. You don't want to listen to what you should have. Okay, so you're going to learn it the hard way. This is what he's saying. When it comes, you will be in the future. You will see once everything hits the fan, so to speak. But don't come to me. Go to your king, the one who you chose. However, Vaima'anu ha'am lishmoa bekol Shmuel. Even after all these warnings, the people did not heed the warnings from Shmuel. Vayomru lo. They said, no. We want a king. We want a king of flesh and blood. We want just as the other nations. We want to be just like all the other nations. And we will have a king who will finally judge us and lead us. And he will fight our battles. וישמע שמואל את כל דברי העם, וידברם באוזני אדוני, and Shmuel listens to all their arguments, and he brings again this word. He's gonna so to speak. This is again. It's not that God doesn't listen, but he summarizes all that which occurred between again them and the elders. Okay, so in other words, even after the warnings, no, this is what we want. I don't know. Does this sound like it's very much I find it particularly I mean Jews for sure, but Israelis especially, we wanna fit in like all the other nations. We go that extra mile that in order for us that people around the world, nations around the world will finally accept us. We're just like you, we're not any different than you, etc. And here, this is exactly what the Israelites are saying to Samuel. Vayomer Adonai el Shemuel. And so God speaks to Shmuel, Shma bekolam. Once again, he says, listen to their request. What is it? Vehimlachta lahem melech, and you shall appoint, and you shall anoint a king for them. And finally, Shmuel relents, and he agrees, Vayomer Shmuel and el Anshe Israel. And so Samuel tells to the elders of the Israelites, Lechu ish le'iro, go home. We have a consensus. We have an understanding of what is going to happen. Fine, go home. Subject closed. And this is where chapter 8 ends. So this is, although it seems like it's not a chapter that is great in terms of action and war and this is laying down this is a super important subject in the laying of the next wave of leadership in Israel, in the way that the nation of Israel the leadership is going to move away, not so much away just from prophesizing, because there will be prophets around, but literally there will be a monarch that has the last say. Each monarch will really have, I don't want to say it in terms of a son, but they will always have a prophet with them. If you kind of like, if you want to look at it kind of, and I look at it in a humorous way, Robin Hood and not Robin Hood, Batman and Robin. You have Batman is still, and you have Robin who's but Robin does all the dirty work, etc. That makes Batman look good. But Batman doesn't always listen to what Robin has to say, And it was always a tandem of a king and a prophet. Sometimes end up being kings and false prophets, but in order to give them legitimacy, they usually have some kind of spiritual leaders that are associated with them, as you will see as well. That will happen coming up with Shaul, will be the first king, and later on in Kings as well. That they all get themselves some kind of spiritual. Those that if I can say, the wicked kings do it literally just to get them in order kind of to as a check mark in terms of giving the okay to whatever they're saying, whatever they're doing, kind of legitimizing their position, as you will see. But nonetheless, the ground right now has been laid for a change, a diversion in the way leadership has been up to now. And what actually starts off at first as a negative thing, actually you will see as we go through the chapters and as we go through the kings, is not necessarily a bad thing, because there's the kingdoms also unite, but it always lasts for an X amount. But what we do find is that the people lose touch with God. In other words, now kind of they almost it was too much for them to be directly, each and every one of them individually, with God, so to speak. They wanted another level of bureaucracy, that which will separate them almost, if you want to look at it, between God or the upper echelon. Now there's another, bureaucracy. And you see that as well in generations as they lose kind of touch with God. Any questions? It was a short chapter, short and sweet, but sets up the segue into the history of the kingships and monarchism in our history. Any questions? Insights?
Mhm.
So I again, what I find, Cindy, I know that you came just a couple of verses late, but at the beginning it was very interesting, that Samuel actually appoints his two sons at the beginning as to help.
I read it. I
Yeah.
did read it.
And that mimics again Eli HaKohen in terms of with his two sons that he and I think there is this beautiful underlying tone in Tanakh of the humanistic level of a parent. We really try hard. We really want our children to either take over from us or succeed in what we do. And sometimes we're even blinded that they are not actually appropriate for that job. But nonetheless, sometimes we force them into it, and we actually believe that they will do it the same way, or at least with the same fervor, the same belief as we do. But they're not qualified, and we're talking about great men. We're talking about Kohen Hagadol. This is not just some random individual off the street that his sons went a little bit astray. We're talking about Samuel. This is Shmuel. This is a great prophet, a great luminary, an individual in our history, and his sons were simply not even capable. They saw it as a means of bettering their life in through bribery and cheating and diversion of judgments that is so humanistic in terms of the plight that I think each and every one as a parent, for your parent, you always want to see your child succeed, and we keep on seeing like this. No matter how great you are, especially people who devote their life to the public and don't have this balance of personal life and public life. And we see it today. Anybody who's, really just involved in public has no connection with his family or her family. Or at least they're not being brought up with the same values that person has, because he or she is not transmitting it to their children because they're not with them. Just because you are their parents doesn't mean that they will receive those exact values. That takes a lot with, the values comes with being with them, with showing them lessons, etc., winning them, and making them social. And here you have these great people who fail in their ability to rear children. I think it's a very interesting.
I'm not sure if that's what that is. It could be, but sometimes when you force someone to do something that they don't want to do, they're not going to do a good job.
Right. Here it's more, you're absolutely right, Cindy. I'm just saying that there's a certain pattern that you can see of a leadership, and you also don't see, just like Eli did not reprimand his children. If you remember, that was their punishment later on to have no kinship, right? Their lineage was to die out, because Eli did not put a stop to their corruption. And here also, there's no mention of Shmuel speaking to his children, trying to correct it, that which is right. It's just the text just says, that they were corrupt, and then the elders of people realized, hey, they don't want to be stuck with this type of leadership, a corrupt leadership, and they want to change it. So they're asking for a king. So as I mentioned at the beginning, it's not necessarily you can't, at least I can't really fault them for wanting a different leadership and seeing the way that his two sons were. But there's no mention of Shmuel, going out and trying to correct and see, hey, what's going on? Going to his children, Joel and Avia, what's happening? What's this thing that I'm hearing? At least Eli did go and speak to his children, but he never reprimanded them.
Excuse me. There's a similarity with the parasha this week. Look at what happened. They made the golden calf. What did Aaron do about it?
Yes. So
and Aaron's sons, for that matter.
Yes, that was last week's parsha. Yeah, exactly. This is more of a people, and I'm talking about here even just as a personal, with our children, in terms of the effect that we can have, or sometimes negative even. And I'm not talking about each and every one of us. I'm talking about, we see, we hear often of stories. But I think there's a lot of subcontexts, maybe, if you want to look behind the scenes, if you look beyond the text, the story that they're telling you, but how they're getting to a certain point, there are lessons that are to be had as well. Don't forget, when Shmuel is traveling up and down the nation, up and down the countryside, I highly doubt that he has these two young boys following him, miles upon miles upon miles, and into war, so they can see it. He'll return home and for a couple of months, and that would be his time at home. But before he knows it, he's even at home, he's listening to cases, and people are coming to him for his advice and for counsel. So the better parts of the day are not spent with really bringing up his children. That's the way that I see it. As was Eli. As the head of the Kohen Gadol, he's not sitting at home, doing crosswords puzzle. He's got a big role. He's overseeing the temple work, etc. So perhaps there's a little bit of you're relying a little bit too much on the nanny, maybe, that if I can say, or on somebody else's value, that you're not being at home. That ends up at the end, they end up paying the price for it, which is
Yeah, but if I may, Yossi,
yes,
we see today parents who have brought up their children with a Jewish background and all of the best, and we see the consequences of some of the young people today are saying and doing, that have their parents horrified. And so I don't think it's only a lack of attention and bringing up. I think we've got to be lucky, and we're living the serious results today.
A great point, Philip. But I also think we hide behind certain things. Just sending, I'll give you a very, very sending your kids to elementary Jewish school, so to say that I gave you a Jewish education, that's not really what a Jewish education is. And I think we have a little bit of a misnomer. That's sending your kids to a school with Jews. That's not Jewish education. It's very, 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 very different. Jewish education doesn't stop once you're at home after 3:30 because the class is over. Jewish education doesn't stop over the weekend because now you are whatever you decided to do. And then to say, the kid went to Jewish school and look at what he or she's doing, that means that the education that they received was not sufficient. It's superficial, and I'm not talking about all the cases, but I think by and large, our reliance on the Jewish education to educate our kids really says that they're not getting anything at home. Exactly to the point of these stories that I'm saying, that they are getting most of their education from somewhere else, not from home or from their parents. And you're absolutely right. It is, Philip, horrifying what some of the youths are, how do you call it, what they're shouting or how they're aligning themselves. But it's miseducation or lack thereof. And
And I-
it's dangerous.
And I
Yeah, just interject, sorry, come back to Samuel's. And God said to Samuel, go tell the people. So he went to tell the people. Wasn't there a scene where the earth opened up from under some of them because of their attitude?
Not,
Or
not
do I have the wrong prophet?
This is, yeah, it's the wrong, it's not this story, not yet. No, not this story,
Okay.
Stephen.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right, sorry. Okay.
Not a problem.
ask a question about Saul.
Yes.
Saul didn't turn out to be the greatest king. Like, he didn't win his battles. So my question is, why wasn't Saul the best king? He's the first king. He should be.
So this is, again, part of it was, if you want to say it, the built-in curse that God kind of warned the people of. Also, when you read, and I don't want to ruin it for everybody before we we get into the crux of Shaul, which is very interesting. And by the way, and if you see it, Shaul, the way that he's described, he's really described like as a great, like handsome, taller than everybody, a presence in the room. He was very wise, etc. But as you read the stuff later on, and again, there's no medical reports, that you read, that we don't have, one of the commentaries is a doctor giving his or her, medical analysis. But if you really look at the text, he was going senile. At the end, whatever that might be, medically, he was not fit to be king, and there's no question about it. Towards the end of his life, when he starts doing his own things, not listening to what Shmuel, the exact instruction Shmuel gives him. But this is where I was talking about, where you have the Robin, how do you call it? You have Batman and Robin. Batman at the end makes his decision. Sometimes, and Robin stays quiet. Sometimes, Robin gives him the coordinates, and Batman decides not to go there. And it's the same thing. You see it very clearly in the text that it's the king really, decides on what the prophet says, whether he will follow it or not. And sometimes when he realizes he's wrong, he tries to, speak or give himself reason why he did it, and that God shouldn't get mad at him because his intention was that. But you see it because he does not follow, and specifically with Agag, as you mentioned it, Farla, with what is, we know, would be the precursor for Purim. So when the Amalek, when he did not destroy Amalek, and then everything starts falling from there. So in particular, so again, there's, I think, things also in the back. It's not that he was destined to be a failure, on the contrary, but the whole idea of relying on human leadership per se, and moving away from relying on God as the leader, is kind of, I see it again, and this is my perception, and our perception's also skewed with the way we see things, but from reading it, is you look at it as the people they felt the religion was very hard to follow. It was too cumbersome on them. They wanted, let somebody, they even said, look, he will lead us, he will go to battle for us. Who's going to battle? The king's going to battle against a whole army? No, he's going to have still people who are, but he's going to be the one who's responsible, not me. he will be responsible for making that decision. So if we lose, we know who we can go and blame, or we know who we can go. In other words, if you look at what they're saying, they don't want to have any more of this pressure on them that if God says this, now they have to do it. No. If God wants, he will tell the king, and the king will be responsible. Not they will. They won't. They're just subjects of the king. There's another level of bureaucracy, like I said, and through that means the people at the end also you get to see where they also lose that connection with God, their ability to not necessarily speak directly, but associate themselves with God. So it's a very interesting thing. But Farley, we will see as we go through the chapters, we will see absolutely what happens with Shaul. But keep that in mind, and I'll keep on bringing it up as I read it. It's an incredible thing with how he gets old and just his mannerism change, etc. And definitely there's some kind of degeneration. I don't know what it was, but that would be very interesting to do. But 100%.
Lost my picture.
Anybody else for a comment, a question? I'm gonna give me one second.
Lost my whole, oh, there it is.
Well, I just